No peace, no fascist USA!
Please move all the way to the sidewalk, please.
I think us as a community, we can all help people open their eyes and become more open-minded to what's going on in the world.
Hundreds of protesters came out last night for a massive demonstration in front of the federal courthouse downtown. That's where it started, and it ran peacefully for the first 2 hours as they voiced their discontent with President Trump's immigration policies. When the crowd spilled onto Las Vegas Boulevard, blocking traffic, and that's when the trouble began with officers. As they say, some people also vandalized the building and began throwing objects at officers. That's when they declared it an unlawful assembly and worked to disperse the crowd. In the end, 94 protesters were arrested, 7 juveniles were issued citations, and 4 officers were hurt in those confrontations. I was part of our News 3 crew in the middle of it all as the unrest unfolded and the crowd and police clashed. And a big shout out to our photographers who did the hard work to bring it all to you live. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Snyder.
And I'm Marie Mortera. That crowd was massive, estimated at about 800 according to Metro Police. Tonight, News 3 has every angle of the aftermath covered, from the arrests to the rights of the protesters to now the governor's response and what happens if the National Guard is activated here. Also, a look ahead to the No King's Day protest planned for Saturday. We have News 3 anchor Dana Wagner leading off our team coverage live from where we left off last night there on Fremont Street. Dana?
Yeah, we're going to be talking to Tiffany about what constitutes an unlawful assembly. I think that's something that we don't have a lot of experience with in this community. But one, I wanted to set the scene for you. Jim, I saw you on that corner across the street on the west side of Las Vegas Boulevard last night during our 11 o'clock news, and it was a much different scene. This intersection was filled with hundreds of protesters. We also saw dozens of Metro police officers at this corner as well. No signs at all that there was a protest here. And if you look down the Fremont Street Experience, it looks like a typical Thursday night in Las Vegas. So right now we want to bring in Tiffany Lane. We were talking about that unlawful assembly. That's when everything kind of took a turn last night when they declared that unlawful assembly. They told people to disperse. Some of them did not. And that's when they came in to make those arrests. And you've kind of been digging into what constitutes an unlawful assembly.
Yeah, Dana, there were a lot of questions last night. A lot of people, social media, people who were there saying, what is the unlawful assembly? And they felt they weren't really getting the answers. Well, just a few hours ago, we heard from Metro Police that the reason they dispersed the crowds was that they were saying that there were people throwing rocks and water bottles at some of the officers, injuring 4 officers. We also heard about some graffiti on the federal building and some neighboring businesses and people who were not getting out of the street when they were asked to. So they were saying that is something that constitutes as unlawful assembly. Now, there are some groups who have questions. Let's take a look at some of those questions right now. Some claiming that these protests were actually peaceful, and they have a lot of questions surrounding why these protesters were dispersed. ACLU of Nevada Executive Director Attar Hasibullah says his team has several legal advisors that were actually there monitoring the protests and making sure that people who have the right to protest were not having their rights violated. But they said there were questions about how police handled dispersing the crowd. They believe Metro was not being clear at the rally why there was unlawful assembly. His team says the information is important to know because we do know that there is a major rally planned for Saturday that's in coordination with other rallies that are planned around the country. Now, Hasibullah says some of the dispersal orders last night were also not loud enough to be heard by some of the protesters and believes they did not get guidance on where to go either when they were dispersed. Take a listen.
And we were told on at least one of those occasions that there was not direction provided where individuals could go. It also wasn't clear what, if any, unlawful activity was occurring besides folks likely trying to step on the street to get around a crowded sidewalk, which is commonplace here in Vegas.
Now, according to Metro's website, dispersals can be issued when there is illegal activity like having weapons or traffic violations, and only a uniformed officer is able to give this order, and it is supposed to be read in English and Spanish, which according to police in their post today, they're saying they did give those orders a few times. But tonight on News 3, you're going to hear a very different angle. You're going to hear from the police union that represents Metro officers. They have a very different take on what happened last night. So right now, a lot of different perspectives on what happened, and they're also going to tell us what their plans are as officers for Saturday's big event.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not just one event tomorrow. There are 2 protests that could happen in our fine city, and you've been doing some digging into that as well.
Yeah, so the police union tells me that they're not sure, but there's likely going to be one tomorrow, Friday night. But Saturday, as you mentioned, there are supposed to be 2, one in the morning. The big one is the one that is in coordination with other rallies across the country happening on Saturday night. Now, we heard there were about 800 to 1,000 people last night. Well, I was told that it's going to be even bigger. Just tonight's rally, 200 Metro officers. So they're going to ramp that up even more. I told shifts were turned around to make sure that there's enough people here on Saturday night.
We're all hoping that this thing remains peaceful. Any rally that happens in Las Vegas, part of the First Amendment, but you can't get it out of control. Most of these protesters are peaceful, but you got some hooligans involved in the mix too. So that's it for now. It is a normal Thursday night on Fremont Street. We'll see what happens this weekend, guys.
Let's hope it stays peaceful, because when those rubber bullets start flying and the flashbangs are going off and the tear gas, it's a dicey situation for everyone involved.
All right, thanks Dana and Tiffany out there. Now we're hearing from the mayor of Las Vegas, Shelley Berkeley. She's reacting to last night's demonstrations. In a post to X this morning, she wrote, quote, "I support everyone's right to protest and peacefully assemble. These are rights and freedoms guaranteed to all citizens under our Constitution. However, I ask that all protests be peaceful and lawful. Demonstrators cross the line when they hurt others, damage property, or take over our roadways." She also urges restraint and good judgment from both protesters and law enforcement.
And we reached out to Congresswoman Susie Lee for comment. She says, quote, "Anyone breaking the law, assaulting police, or perpetrating violence should be held accountable. Attacks on the First Amendment right to peacefully protest are completely unacceptable, yet all protests should be peaceful." A California Democratic senator was forcibly removed from a news conference held by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in L.A. today. Senator Alex Padilla attempted to ask a question. Some people say he was loud and aggressive. There's some debate over that, and this happened as Noem began her remarks, and you can see what happened next. Security guards surrounded the senator, took him out of the room, and there's also debate about what happened next. A statement from his office says he was handcuffed and forced to the ground.
For the secretary, because the fact of the matter is, a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your. I also want to talk about.
So in the aftermath, Noem and Padilla had a 15-minute meeting after this incident, and then both separately spoke about what happened.
I wish that he would have reached out and identified himself and let us know who he was and that he wanted to talk. His approach, was something that I don't think was appropriate at all.
I encourage everybody to please peacefully protest, just like I was calmly and peacefully listening in that press conference and attempting to ask a question.
The Homeland Security Secretary also says that she and the senator have exchanged phone numbers and will be in contact moving forward. Senator Padilla has been critical of President Trump's decision to mobilize California's State National Guard to protect federal buildings during protests against ICE raids.
U.S. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada posting her reaction to this incident, calling on Secretary Noem to resign. The senator goes on to say, quote, "This level of power is shameful, outrageous, and is not doing anything to keep our homeland safe." Now, let's send it back out to the field to Dana Wagner.
All right, so there are some concerns about the rallies that are happening here Saturday. We just heard from Tiffany that she's hearing that the rallies on Saturday could be even bigger than they were last night. So we sent our Steve Wolford out to the Readiness Center for the Nevada National Guard in North Las Vegas, and they're ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. Do I have that right, Steve?
Yeah, that's true. I spoke a little while ago with Colonel John Kruger from Carson City. He's one of the top officers in the Nevada Guard. He told me that they are watching the situation in Los Angeles, learning some lessons from it, but it's also worth noting the Guard mobilization in California was made under the federal authority of President Trump. At this point, Colonel Kruger says that they have not been given word from Governor Lombardo to mobilize the Nevada Guard to support Metro, but he says that process is simple and it won't take long if the governor decides to go ahead and do it.
If our
services are required, the governor sends a request to the Office of Emergency Management, and they produce a mission request. Mission request will come to my Joint Operations Center, and we will do a little bit of mission analysis and figure out which of our forces best fit the need that's being asked of us.
Colonel Kruger, by the way, says the Nevada Guard gets extensive training in crowd control. He said a good example of how that's utilized would be on New Year's Eve, when we would see as many as 200 Nevada Guard out on the Strip to do crowd control. We also asked the governor's office about a possible Guard mobilization. They responded a few hours ago saying that they are in communication with Metro and they will just keep an eye on how everything goes. Earlier today, it's worth noting, Texas Governor Greg Abbott mobilized the Texas National Guard in advance of those Saturday No Kings Day protests, which will be happening not only all over Texas, but all over the United States and here as well. Reporting live, Steve Wolford, News 3. Dana, send it back to you.
It's not something our state faces very often around here. In fact, I'm guessing that Metro, the officers there, learned some lessons from last night's protests, and they'll try to, I'm sure, bring those to bear coming up on Saturday night. So that's it for now from Fremont Street. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Dana, thank you for that. Steve as well.
All right, we are looking into demonstrations, riots popping up across the country. Now, some Republicans are launching investigations into how these protests are being organized.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has that story from Washington.
Republicans arguing there are powerful puppet masters fueling the anti-ICE riots rocking Los Angeles.
These people are agitators, they're paid, they're professionals.
And they want to know who they are.
These aren't spontaneous at all. They're about as authentic as AstroTurf.
Senator Josh Hawley launching an investigation this week into the riots, sending a letter to Angelica Salas.
We are here, united in community.
The leader of the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, CHIRLA for short. CHIRLA is a taxpayer-funded immigration activist organization with ties to the Democratic Party. According to the government transparency group Open the Books, CHIRLA received $35 million from the state of California.
It has gotten out of hand, and this is in part due to funding from taxpayers that state funds have been given to these organizations that are encouraging rioters.
Hawley's letter claims credible reporting suggests they've provided logistical support and financial resources to individuals engaged in these disruptive actions. Hawley adding, bankrolling civil unrest is not protected speech. CHIRLA denies such involvement in the riots. As for funding sources from the private sector side, House Oversight Committee now calling on China-based billionaire Neville Singham to testify.
Singham coordinated the anti-ICE LA protest. Again, this picture just can't be shown enough.
Lawmakers aiming to dig into his ties to the Chinese Communist Party and his funding of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which has ties to the LA riots, the protests at Columbia University, and the murder of the 2 Israeli embassy staffers in D.C. As Congress conducts their investigations, President Trump also tasking Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Justice Department to hold those accountable for illegal actions related to these riots responsible. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Several anti-Trump protests are planned in cities across the country on Saturday during the military parade in Washington, D.C. As we mentioned earlier in this broadcast, they're being called the No Kings protests, as Saturday's military parade celebrates the Army's 250th anniversary, and it also coincides with President Trump's 79th birthday. Protests are scheduled in nearly 2,000 locations around the country, including here in Las Vegas.
We will continue to follow all the developments in these protests that are happening here at home and across the country. And as we've been hearing about, more planned in the days ahead. You can stay on top of all the latest information, get it sent straight to your phone from the News 3 app. If you scan that code on the right-hand side of your screen, you can download that and get all the breaking news. And there's been a lot of it lately as it happens.